Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Taproom Success Show. I'm Andrew Copeland, joined by my good buddy, Carrie Shumway. Carrie, how's everything up north?
Everything up north is wonderful. We're in the fall season. We've got foliage, we've got out-of-towners, we've got apple picking and pumpkins popping up, and yeah, it's a beautiful time of year up here.
It is a beautiful time of year. I haven't seen much fall foliage yet here in Virginia, but I hope to make an escape to the mountains where I'll get a better view over the coming weeks or so. So I love this season. It's finally starting to feel cool. But we're going to not talk about the weather anymore. We're going to talk about what's going on in your tap room and these little things that you can do to make a little bit more money and get some profit in there. So what we're going to talk about today is how the taproom experience is changing. A few years ago, most of you did not have food because you didn't sign up to be a restaurant. But as we've learned, when people go to a place like a taproom, they're not just bringing that beer nerd along with them. They're bringing their family, they're bringing their kids, and they're bringing people who don't even drink beer. So what can you do to better capture everyone's attention? And we've talked about this before, but food is something you need to be considering. Like once again, you didn't sign up to run a restaurant, but when you have food, you're going to see higher tabs. You're going to see people hang out longer, and you're going to see it serve as a motivator for people to come a little bit more frequently. So, Carrie, today we're talking about taproom food profits. Because once again, it's becoming mandatory, whether that's, simple snacks or a full-on kitchen. And it gets complicated when you dive into this. So, Carrie, let's start. How can taproom owners and managers think about building a profitable and manageable food program?
I think the first step is to embrace it, right? Because when I talk to, taproom and brewery owners, there's a lot of resistance. Oh, I have to do it. I don't really want to. I hate food. Never want to be in the restaurant. Grumble, grumble, grumble. Totally understand. But the first is to a little bit of a mindset shift and say, all right, how do I make this food program a profitable part of my business? What are the ways in which I can do that? So first is just a little bit of a shift that you can do it. It's within your, because the food business often feels a little bit out of control. Like I don't have a lot. So how do we gain control? It often feels like I don't really got a good handle on the numbers. So how do we get better visibility into the numbers? And it feels very complex. Like how do I simplify this? So that's what we wanted to share today is, ways, strategies that you can do that. But really starting with, I think, a mindset shift to say, we want to create a profitable food program and reduce or eliminate the guesswork and complexity. So that's starting with that as our goal.
Okay, what are some financial best practices to follow, and what numbers should Taproom focus on with their food program?
So we usually just try to keep things simple. So three financial best practices. The first is really you've got to understand the relative margins and profitability of each revenue stream in your business. So if you have just a tap room and you have food and non-food, setting up your financials so you really understand what the margins, expenses, and relative profitability is of your food program and of everything else within your tap room. Now, if you're in distribution, that's a third revenue stream. So for QuickBooks people, you can set up classes. So you might have a taproom food class or a restaurant class within, and then maybe taproom non-food, and then distribution. So you can see each one. And it can be very enlightening because you don't really, most of the breweries that I work with don't have a really good handle on the profitability of each of those sections. And usually what we find is that the taproom non-food is quite good margins, quite profitable. Food is less so, and distribution's quite a bit worse. But you can identify and set those out and really understand kind of how you're doing the relative profitability. So that's that. Another is, using benchmarks, key metrics, where should we be? Where are we at? What are some industry standards? So one takeaway here is that we use a lot of percentages because often people will be like, well, what should my, labor costs for food be as a percentage, which my food, and we'll talk about that. And the quick answer is, it's usually around 30% for food, 30% for labor, meaning if you calculate your labor costs, total dollars, divided by your total food sales, 30%. Calculate all your food costs, divided by your total food sales, around 30%. These are very much, excuse me, rules of thumb, but that's generally where the numbers, and there's ranges on these things. But I would encourage people to really think about this concept of contribution margin in dollars, because we put dollars in the bank, not percentages. And what we find, and what you may find if you do this analysis, is your most profitable from a dollar perspective, menu items might be your least profitable from a percentage standpoint because they're just higher ticket prices. So we really need to understand those numbers. And I guess the third thing is really tracking these trends because a lot of time, costs change, staffing costs, labor costs, food costs, prices can change, etc. So really having a good system, and I use just simple trackers, simple spreadsheets. Food costs as a percentage, contribution margin in dollars, labor dollars, labor percentage, so you can kind of see it over time. So those are three things I would start with is, separate your financials based on your revenue stream, use those benchmarks to track, and then have some simple trend analysis so you can see what's happening to your costs over time.
No, good advice there, Carrie. Now, tap rooms that I visited, they have everything from just your basic pretzels, sometimes, the bag pretzels, sometimes the hot pretzels, to pizza, sandwiches, bar food. I've seen all kinds of different displays of restaurant food. So let's go into a little bit more about restaurant food strategies. Talk to us about the narrow menu and platform strategy. What are these and why are they important?
Well, you and I learned these from Mark Meckler from Crafting a Strategy many years ago. And as you know, it remains one of my favorite Taproom monthly expert calls that we did. Because of I think the way he presented it and made it so approachable, simple, but yet powerful. So it's kind of some of I love simple things. So these concepts are very much restaurant concepts. And here again, I would encourage folks that are listening that have a food program of any type of complexity to study the restaurant industry, right? It only kind of makes sense. I mean, they do it all the time. So these are some draws, from those same strategies. And so narrow menu and a platform strategy essentially means how can we attack the complexity of your food program? Because what ends up happening is we bring in food, albeit reluctantly, and before you know it, we expand the menu, and the back of the house is a nightmare, and I can't manage the inventory, and it just becomes very complicated. So the narrow menu basically means to have a limited number of ingredients with which you can create a large number of food offerings. So that's your platform strategy. So narrow menu is back of house simplicity, just a few ingredients. Platform strategies. How do I take those few ingredients and create a lot of options for my customers? Because they want options. They don't want to come in and find like two things on the menu, but they do want to come in and so you might think of Chipotle, right? Handful of raw ingredients, dozens of options for your customers. I've used this example of In-N-Out Burger, which, love that place. Simple burger, fries, shakes. I mean, what's so special? Well, but what they do is they'll vary it up with these options, such as their animal style fries or protein style fries. Like just sort of weird and kind of cool names, but wow, that's different. But you're maintaining, again, the simplicity of a limited number of ingredients. That's your narrow menu and a wide variety of options for your customers. That's your platform strategy. And that's why it's important because we want simplicity back of house, but we want options for our customers.
So is that why we see so many breweries have pizza?
Well, pizza's a great example. I mean, here's the thing too, is we overthink this stuff, right? And we were talking about this in Virginia with Chris Farman, and I think he had just said, look, you know, again, you want to be true to yourself. You want to, stay in the lane that you feel is authentic and right for your customer base and what you want to create. But at the same time, people they love burgers and fries. They love pizza. They'll love, small plates and bowls and just keeping it simple. So pizza, of course, most people love pizza. And you talk about, right in the bullseye of a narrow menu and platform strategy is very limited number of ingredients, an incredible wide variety. And you can do some really interesting, like a very strange example. We were in Maine this summer and there was a blueberry pizza. I'm like,
I
geez, I
would
don't
totally get
know.
that. Yeah,
What's that?
I would totally get that.
You would totally get that. And I got it. And it was actually really good. So who would have thought? But you can get like creative with this stuff. So it doesn't have to be a cheese pizza, pepper. Those are fine. People love those too. But yeah, that's a great example of narrow menu platform strategy. Go nuts, have some fun.
Awesome. So now let's talk about another strategy, menu engineering, which Mark Meckler, when he was a guest, also talked a lot about. It sounds kind of fancy, so tell us what it is.
Yeah, it's fancy. It's fancy and it's great. And really all it means is how are you designing and curating your menu so that you give the customers exactly what they want because you know the items you're offering them are delicious and they're going to come back for more. But they also have the best margins so that you can meet the goal of creating a profitable food program. So menu engineering is really just a couple parts. One is understanding what your food costs are, understanding what your contribution margin is for every single menu item. and most folks don't. And I would challenge you listening to check this out because you might find some really interesting things. Now, there's a matrix that you can use to kind of overlay your menu to say, all right, well, how do I organize this? Now, in the restaurant business, they'll organize it into kind of four quadrants. And the quadrants are really designed to find out your stars. These are the things that your margins are good, the sales are good, people love these items, sell more of them. Your dogs, the margins stink. They really don't sell very well. Get rid of them. Get them off the menu. Curate your menu. Prune the deadwood. Those are the things that you'll need to do. And then the other categories are really somewhere in between. They're selling pretty well, but the margins stink, or the margins are great and they're not. So puzzles and plow horses, and we don't want to get too hung up in the names, but the concept is do those four quadrants, great margins, great sales, sell more. And when I say that, I don't say it flip like duh, sell more, but it's like it's like sell more meaning when I walk in, maybe there's one of those table tents that's showing me that food item that's one of your stars that you really want to bring to my attention. How about your social media strategy? I don't go on social media a lot, but most people do, and they're getting, information about we've got the most incredible, protein bowl that's coming out. I don't know. And we're doing some animal fries, something that's going to be like, well, that's kind of interesting. Suggestive selling. So when I walk in, so menu engineering is, you got to know your numbers. You want to really focus on contribution margins in dollars. What are your best dollar items? And then you want to direct your customers to those menu items that you know they're going to love and your income statement is going to love as well. So there's lots of different ways to do it and you can get real creative with it. But those are, in a nutshell, that's the takeaway.
Great breaking down of menu engineering. I always love diving into it. And Carrie, you talked a lot about the financial benefits and how to get your food program set up, but you're going to see an impact in the tap room that's going to be pretty impressive. We've done some data where in my secret hopper hat, we studied some data, and we see that when guests have food items, not just like snacks, but things that are more significant, like over the $10 mark food items, guests are going to spend 18 minutes longer in your tap room. They're going to spend 20% more on beer. And tabs overall, we see are 88% higher.
Wow,
So
that's incredible.
there's an impact to adding food. Once again, everybody's setup is different, but find what's right for you. And Carrie, as we wind down, what's the one thing that a taproom manager should do next after listening to your session today?
Take your um, take your menu and take it seriously. Understand your numbers. And you can just do a very simple grid. Um, what is each item on your menu cost? What are you pricing it for? And what's your contribution margin in dollars? And really understand, the economics of your food program because that's the only way to build a profitable one. Um, Now, what's interesting, I think, about this one thing, and that is the one thing, is food menu, figure out your costs, figure out your contribution margin, identify where you might have some dogs that need to be pruned, some stars that you need to promote some more. But the same concept can be applied to any aspect of your business. So this is really just menu engineering for food, menu engineering for your draft lineup, menu engineering for your merchandise, the menu engineering is really just a concept of know your numbers, understand where you're actually making money, do more of that, understand where you're not, do less of that, get rid of it. Very simple concepts, but we got to have the data in order to understand, what actions to take. But start with that, start with understanding your menu costs, contribution margin.
And everybody, I encourage you to join our Taproom Success community. There's tons of benefits to joining. Once a month, we have a mastermind where we bring together taproom owners and managers from across the country, and we could talk about what's working with regard to food strategy. What items are your top sellers? How are you getting guests to order it? We have lots of conversations about that. And we also have an industry expert session when we bring in people like Mark Meckler, who talked about menu engineering, who can kind of give that expert advice to all of you on specific areas of our industry. But we have tons of pre-recorded content as well for you to dive in and to help with you forming a better taproom, a more successful taproom. You can learn more at taproomsuccess.com. We hope to see you as part of the Taproom Success membership. And Carrie, I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, Andrew. See you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.